this one, I know I've made some other videos, but for this one, probably going to be more about, I want to say just like mostly just the Corvettes, like mine, like the, and I don't think most people will be as crazy as I am, where you end up dailying the car, like myself. But I think you should try to, what do you call it? Like, I think there should be a whole thing where you really need to look at it, where if you want to do performance upgrades, like even just simple stuff, like, you know, obviously if you want to throw a supercharger, yeah, you better make sure that that engine, or even at that point the transmission, is even ready for that. All right, some people just kind of throw it at it and hope that it works, because you can, you know, you can obviously control your boost. If you want like super light amount of power, it'd be good if you obviously put, like, maybe, let's say like some Pro Chargers, like 5 psi. Who knows, right? Something not too insane, but good. Now, if you want to do certain upgrades, you still have to take into account everything that came with the car, right? Step one, better make sure that your car can actually maintain good amount of heat, right? Like I said, compared to cars today, like these older ones, they run hot, right? I mean, a lot of newer GM cars still run hot. Don't get it twisted. That is still a very common thing. That's just the way they are, right? So they run hotter than most cars on the road. But for purposes like this, for C5s, I think if you're just gonna keep it, you know, fairly stock, cool, you know, maybe like a mild exhaust, catback, whatever, that's fine. But I think if you're gonna go flat out and you want to go bolt on everything, whatever the case may be, I don't know, you've got to keep in mind of everything else that this car had. That what did this car do before that, right? Because the dash will have temps. Like your dash, you can go press through your gauges, and it'll throw you like oil temp, coolant temp. If you have an automatic trans, it'll throw you trans temp. For the manual ones, I think it's literally just oil temp, coolant temp. Obviously, everything else gets its oil pressure, like a digital and analog. It's you know, it's quite nice for me. I kind of like it. But for, let's say, if you want to do, let's start off with like a simple one, right? On like what most people would probably do on a lot of these cars. Let's throw in some headers, right? Long tube headers. Say what's American V8s and then long tube headers, or just for anyone who wants to do performance cars, just long tube headers, right? If you have smaller cars, turbo. But for mine, for example, we'll start with a simple, basic long tube headers. Can be expensive, right? Obviously, like especially for the more big name ones, like Cooks, American Racing, etc. They're all within the 1,700 plus, right? Cooks, you probably might hit $3,000 on Cooks headers. So, like the cheapest ones on the market would be Speed Engineering. That is probably the cheapest long tube headers at the moment. And that one's like within, like, after you do everything, right? After you picked all your choices, everything in that case, it's like $500 probably, right? Somewhere in that ballpark. because obviously, like, I think for that one they pretty much tax you depending on where you live. So like somewhere there, but I don't think it'll hit 1,000. Not for the C5s. It's quite nice, and from everything I've heard, the Speed Engineering headers are actually quite good, right? There's obviously their flaw. There's like the only flaw that I've ever seen was the clamps that if you order clamps from them, the clamps are not that great. Like they pretty much, most people just say there are better clamps on, like, you literally can go to Amazon and buy them for not too much, and those clamps will actually work. So just buy those. Like, I don't think they give you an option. I think they just come with obviously they're gonna come with clamps, I think, more than standard. The only way to do it, well, I don't know, actually. I don't know if there's a way where you can not get it if they think you're gonna try to weld it. But long tube headers in those, they're catless headers. They do sell, the only thing that was new that I saw recently from their website, they do sell like welded in cats. I don't know how well they work. Sometimes I'm kind of tempted. I kind of want to get them, right? If this wasn't my only car. And that's the whole thing for this one, right? Is if this was not my only car, I would have probably already bought a lot of the things that I would have wanted to give this car before. But if there's anything I've ever learned, it's like do not do performance upgrades to the daily. Just don't. Leave the daily where it's at, because if that's your only car and that is your daily driver, is that the only one? If something goes down, now what? Right? Have a backup. That's what I'm like. And for me, I'm still looking at cars now. I still look at cars every day. Like, I don't have to get a stupidly, like, brand new car. Would it be nice? Sure, right? Like, or a relatively newer-ish car. Like, I usually try to look at the range for, when I say new-ish, I try to look at somewhere between the 2014, I'll say, like 2014 all the way to 2019, like that little gap right there. I like looking at those, like, pre-COVID years. And it's pretty much the years that the C7s were made. Pretty much years where everything, excuse me, guys. Things were pretty much, everything was rolling. That's when, like, Hellcat started coming out and all this, and like even some of my favorite Mercedes vehicles started coming out. It was a good time. I like that time where everyone was just rolling and it was working. Coyotes were getting stronger. I was like, and then obviously you've got LT1s, which people have proven that can be strong. So, but headers, yeah, I would say, no, I think headers aren't the worst thing in the world in terms of, even if you were to buy them as your daily. Like, would I recommend them? No, not really. Right? But if you do, get thermal wrap. That does actually help a lot. That'll keep your temps down, because it's going to generate more heat. That's just the way they are. They're going to generate more heat than the stock intake manifolds do for the exhaust. That's why the stock ones have heat shielding. So your best way to do it for the long tubes, throw some thermal wrap at it. They're not super pricey. You just get going with it, and they do work. I've seen a couple of those, and yeah, it does actually work quite well in terms of keeping heat out of the underhood, or at least lowering it. Some other ones, like, people want to throw in a cam, right? When you look at cams, I'm like, it doesn't have to be the biggest cam there is, right? The chop, yes, the chop will be there, but you've got to get one that's reasonable for what your car can do. Every car has its own specs. Look at the specs of what the car is capable of and what it has, and go from there. And like, for me, I don't really look at cams too often, or if that at all, really. Just because, I don't know, again, it's my daily. I don't have a reason to look at a lot of these things. So now I looked at it when I first got the car, right? When this car was brand new to me, I wanted to give this thing new cylinder heads, headers, a cam. I wanted to give this thing everything that I wanted to get, that I wanted to give it, right? It was all the things I was looking at. I didn't really look at Pro Chargers that much. They're cool, but for me, I think at that point, I don't know if that's a great idea. I think the other three were a much better idea than just throwing a Pro Charger at it. Now, which one's the best power adder? Probably the Pro Charger. It's just the way it is. It's a Pro Charger. But I think, I was looking at headers. Speed Engineering seems to be a pretty good one. For cams, like I said, I don't really look at cams that often. I look more towards headers just because it's a little bit easier. For that one, yeah, you kind of just have to really look at that one and which ones. There's different cams and what they do. That's cool. Intake manifolds. That one, so you would have to get I think the best way to really utilize that intake manifold is literally by buying a throttle body that can pair with it, right? I see people trying to go with a bigger throttle body. I'm like, if your intake manifold is not capable of taking in that much, it's not going to. Okay, like for mine, like the stock LS6 intake manifolds, they're 78 millimeters. Right? If I try to throw a 90 at it, it's not going to change. 78 is what it's going to set at. Right? I think if you try to go for bigger intake manifolds, I would say make sure you pair it up with the right throttle body. Like for example, like from Fast, like that's some of the more expensive ones from GM or from aftermarket. There's like people saying, I see the biggest ones I've seen thrown onto C5s without having to cut through the hood or anything like that, I think is a 90 or a 92. I don't even know if they even sell a 90 anymore, so probably a 92, like a 92 millimeter. Obviously, you go ahead and get a throttle body with that can pair up to it, and there you go. You got like maybe a relatively small power gain, but it's a power gain at that. Right? It's just it's a work in progress on what is being built here. I've seen MSDs; those are massive. Those have 105s. I'm like, those are big. So you go ahead and look up what you want and see how you want to go about it. 92 in terms of what the hood clearance is. 92 millimeters, I think, is the largest intake manifold is, without having to compromise much of the OEM hood itself. If you want to buy a hood, if you want to buy vented hoods, that can help a lot too, right? That gets the heat out. It's like a heat extraction. It's quite good, especially if you're just racing. I mean, to me, I like hood vents, to be honest. I really do. Hood vents are nice. Like, if done right, I think they can be some of the coolest looking things on a car. Like, I've seen a couple of the ones I liked, but I don't know. I never really wanted to go crazy on it just because it's my daily driver, you know? I mean, that one, I think hood vents, even as a daily driver, I don't think would be a terrible idea. Just because if it's anything cooling related, even just to the underhood for this, like, yeah, literally that's the smallest things can help. Like for that one, you've got hood vents, and these cars tend to run hotter than most. So yeah, that'll help a lot for this car. Even if you don't do what I did. For me, obviously I have a whole, like, the witch radiator and all, but even if you don't go that far, even if you just kept it the way it was, kept it bone stock, hood vents would actually probably help out the car's like own cooling from what they had at that time period. Like, now, would it be a super amount like the way I'm seeing on the radiator? I wouldn't say so, but I think it'll still give you like, a good 10 degrees at best, maybe 20 if it's something really good. I don't know how, but probably at least 10, somewhere between 10 and 20 degrees lower than what you're used to seeing. And that's good, right? So for a normal radiator, if you drive it long enough, this car can hit 200, and on coolant temps, it can hit 220, no problem. It does not take much effort for that thing to really hit. Oil temps will hit, especially for me here in Arizona, in a summery day, oil temps will probably hit upwards of the 210 mark, and that's normal for this car, right? Like they said, even 225, 230, that's pretty good for this car. I'm like, what the hell? I was like, I'm seeing most cars lay 200 max. So I'm like, what the fuck? Oh, sorry. Yeah, 200 max. Right. So I'm like 230 degrees, 225, 230, especially peak summer for me here. That's what I was seeing. I was seeing 220, yeah, at its peak, 225. Right. If I was just stuck in traffic a lot, I saw a bunch of 200 and I think the highest I've ever seen my car hit was I think 230, 232, 235, somewhere in that range. So yeah, it's a lot, right? And it's not a nice thing to see, especially if you actually pay attention and you actually learn about some of these things. I don't know. I don't like it, right? I didn't like it being that high. Now, my coolant temps, my thermostat still opens, obviously. That's been working just fine. And yeah, I can still get up to operating temp. Under good speed, my coolant temps don't even cross 200. And if they do, it goes to 201. That's it. So the radiator does work well. I think if you were to do that, so let's say 220, if you get the hood vents and keep it stock, I think you could probably get relatively close, and at least in terms of getting the heat out. Now, will it still hit the whole 220? Probably once you get close to a stop, when you're not moving, when the radiator's not coming through, or when there's no air coming through the radiator. So, but I think if you were to get performance parts for any of this stuff, I think especially if it relates to adding more power, my only recommendation is I hope that you have another car. Right. That's the way I see it. I just don't like the idea of doing all this performance stuff and this being the only car you have. I like it where you should try to do it where, let's say you have a daily, and that's basically the beater right there. Once you have one of those, have at it. To be honest, have at it. Go crazy. Supercharge, whatever the case is. For me, I'm looking at cars right now. I've been looking for a bit, but right now especially, I'm just really toning in on it. And I'm if I get that car, then this car can literally, the first thing I want to do to this car is throw headers at it. Right? I already got the intake. I've got already just at least a little bit of exhaust, just because I thought it was a fun idea. But like that, and then I'll go from there. Now, whether I throw a cam in this thing or not, I don't know. We'll see how I feel about it. I just want to see what headers on a stock cam feels like. So, or what it sounds like. If it sounds good enough to me, remember, I don't really race that often either. I don't race anybody, right? Because I'm always in traffic. I'm like, I don't go on the highways very much, not as much as I did like last year. But hey, you know, if you want to decide to throw all these performance parts at it, and this is the only car you have, you're braver than me. So I can respect that, to be honest. You know, I'm just here to state my opinion on it. But anyways, I'm about to head to work. You all have a great day. I'm out.